I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
Well, for today's rant, I want to talk about an article that I read up on High Times today. It's entitled, Underaged Narcs Set to Bust Washington State's Pot Shops. It's a short article, so let me just read it to you. You can get the flavor for it. In an attempt to keep Washington's retail pot outlets from contributing to the delinquency of minors, the state has put a rogue gang of young narcs on the payroll for the sole purpose of conducting sting operations. According to reports, the State Liquor Control Board intends to use an underage snitch department to carry out controlled buys across Washington state's newly legalized recreational marijuana stores, in the same way it currently utilizes these types of hired hammers to supervise the state's retail alcohol sales. Liquor Control Board Enforcement Chief Justin Nordhorn says that it makes sense to use the state's current methodologies for monitoring alcohol sales to also oversee what is happening inside the legal marijuana trade. He says that strict enforcement procedures are absolutely necessary at this time, especially since the Federal Department of Justice will undoubtedly be breathing down the state's neck in 2014, just waiting for a slip-up. The state hopes that by operating its legal marijuana commerce with an element of 1940s German law enforcement, that they may be able to prevent Uncle Sam's wrecking crew from unexpectedly swooping in and carting the entire industry and those who regulate it off to federal prison. Said Nordhorn, quote, "Of course the feds are looking at a tightly regulated market around youth access, and I think this shows we're being responsible." End quote. The Liquor Board currently employs about 30 men and women between the ages of 18 and 20 years of age that travel across the state conducting sting operations in liquor stores. This rat force typically consists of college students with interests in law enforcement and substance abuse, and they earn roughly $10 an hour to initiate tattletale tactics against those outlets that do not ensure customers are at least 21 years old. Nordhorn says that a similar group of informants will soon be making their way through Washington state's pot stores and immediately reporting to enforcement agents if sale of marijuana is permitted without a valid state ID. The penalty for a first-time offense is a 10-day suspension of the store's license or $2,500 fine. The second could result in a 30-day suspension. The third could cost the business its license altogether. What's more is that this fashion of pseudo-entrapment could have some clerks facing serious criminal charges, as it is a felony offense to provide minors with weed. Here's an idea. Card kids and don't sell them weed. You know, follow the law. This article, with its rogue gangs of young narcs, underage snitch department, an element of 1940s German law enforcement, rat force, tattletale tactics, pseudo-entrapment. Really? We do this for alcohol? And the stats show in Washington state, about 1 out of 7 18 to 20-year-olds attempting to purchase alcohol are illegally served, and that's with stings. How many bars would serve kids alcohol without the threat of a sting? It's not even like the medical marijuana stings. You know, the ones we've reported from California and such, where the cops go get a fake ID and lie about their illness to pseudo-entrap dispensaries? No, it's not that. In Washington, these will be actual 18 to 20-year-olds. Using their actual underage license. And in Washington state, when you get a license, if you're under the age of 21, it's in portrait orientation. You know, up and down, right? Where if you're 21 and over, it's side to side. It's horizontal. It's landscape orientation. So it's not as if a pot shop owner is being fooled by some 28-year-old pretending to be 20. And it's not as if he's getting a fake license to fool him. This is a pot shop owner serving someone under 21 when presented with a portrait license that is real and clearly under 21. You know, breaking the law. Folks, do we want to legalize marijuana? Do we? Do we really want to legalize marijuana? Because if so, that includes laws to follow, like not serving people under 21. How does the state enforce that law without conducting sting operations? Now, look, personally, I'd rather that the legal age was 18. I figure if you're old enough to carry an M16 in the sand, you're old enough to carry a joint in your hand. However, that's not the law. The law is 21 and older, and the feds are just waiting for sordid tales of stoned teenagers wrecking their cars to give them the excuse to shut it all down and to give them the propaganda they need to forestall the next state from legalizing. As far as I'm concerned, congratulations, kudos to the Washington State Liquor Control Board for making sure that the clerks are going to follow the law. You don't want a felony for serving an underage kid? Don't sell to an underage kid. The licenses are clear. The laws are clear. And we want to legalize. For how many years have we attacked marijuana prohibition by saying, well, drug dealers don't check ID? Well, now the pot dealers have to check ID, and these stings are a fair and reasonable way to ensure that they do just that. I'm starting to see, as I read around the net and I read reactions to legalization, from some of the more, extreme elements of the legalization side, I'm seeing people reject laws and reject regulations and reject taxes. We've been saying tax and regulate, tax and regulate, tax and regulate. Oh, but once the tax and regulation passes, we're bitching about the taxes and the regulation. Now, I have some problems with some of the regulations as well. Like I said, I wish the age was 18, not 21. I wish the taxes were lower. I wish people in Washington State were allowed to grow their own. But until they can, there is now a law to follow. And Washington State and Colorado are going to have a microscope on them from not just the national news media, but the world news media on how this very limited, very tenuous step into full market legalization takes place. And we have our side trying to demonize and warn against reasonable, rational, standard law enforcement procedures that have been used for years with alcohol stings. I think that part of the rejection of this and part of the fear of this has to do with a lot of people's sympathy toward the 18 to 20-year-old pot smoker, who, by the way, tend to be the majority of pot smokers. I mean, from age 16 to 22 is where you find your greatest amount of pot smoking people. So I understand the concern. The clerk might get a felony if he sells to someone underage, but part of getting marijuana legalization passed is getting past the fear the general public has of WOTC. What about the children? And if we show ourselves to be unconcerned with teenagers smoking pot, if we show ourselves to be fighting against reasonable regulations to keep pot out of kids' hands, the next few states that try to legalize and try to say things like tax and regulate will be met with people saying, yeah, we heard that in Colorado, and then you guys oppose the taxes. When we say things like, well, drug dealers don't check ID, let's put it in pot stores where they check ID, they'll point back to this article and people in Washington State saying, oh, but you were against checking IDs and making sure that they got checked. We have to be very careful as we tiptoe through these next few years of the nascent marijuana legalization so we don't ruin it for the next few states that are going to try it. And we have this blueprint. We can see how this has happened before. We saw how in California, when they passed medical marijuana in 1996, and they passed as wide open as of medical marijuana as possible, for any condition a doctor believes marijuana will help. And we saw how that proliferated. And we saw how that turned what was supposed to be medical marijuana with doctors and severely injured people and severely disabled people, how that turned into dock-in-the-box tents on Venice Beach and bikini girls with twirling signs. And from that point, once those abuses got so much airplay, the next states to legalize medical marijuana, every single state from that point on had to come up with a stricter, and more stricter marijuana program. Is that the game plan that we're going to follow for marijuana legalization? Are they going to turn and see that, we legalized an ounce in pot stores in Washington and Colorado, and the marijuana community rejected those regulations, and terrible things happened, so the next states that legalize either don't legalize or pass even more restrictive legalization? That's not what I want to see happen. I want to see Washington and Colorado's marijuana legalization be well regulated, have very, very little abuse, bring in lots of tax revenue, and cause little to no problems for society. So that the next couple of states, Oregon and Alaska, that try to legalize, can say, hey, look at Washington and Colorado. Look how good that turned out. Look what great results we got out of Washington and Colorado. Instead of us having to defend Washington and Colorado, I want Washington and Colorado to be our shining examples of how good legalization can turn out, not the warnings about how bad it could turn out for the next states that try to pass it. And this is something that I think the marijuana community is going to have to definitely get their minds around, is that as we legalize, we're not criminals anymore. And the cops aren't necessarily our enemies anymore. At least we can try to make that happen. Maybe not in New Mexico. But the point is, we need to come to a realization that in a post-legalization world, we need to be fighting for the regulations. Now, again, we can have differences with the regulations. We can think the regulations need to be loosened or expanded. That's fine. And we can fight for that through political channels now that we're legal and we're citizens fighting for more rights. But until that happens, we need to show that we are concerned about upholding the law, and we are concerned about making sure that those federal guidelines are followed so that we don't end up with raids and lawsuits and the whole thing being shut down before it has a chance to bloom. And fortunately, the change is starting to happen. When those DEA raids happen in Denver on the medical marijuana dispensaries, usually the reaction of the marijuana community is, oh my God, how dare you bust the growers? How dare you bust the dispensaries? They're helping the patients. Oh dear. But this time the reaction was, oh, if they're bad actors, if they're shipping out of state, they're violating those federal guidelines, good riddance, get rid of them. That's a major sea change in the marijuana community. And I'm hoping we see more of it. As we legalize, we need to push our community to want to follow those laws so that we can get better laws in the future and in more places. That's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us. For Brian the Red, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.